Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Gould, in his written testimony, Raymond Kelly of the VFW notes that community-based outpatient clinics are crucial to meeting the needs of veterans as the veteran population shifts. I'm wondering if you feel confident that the VA's budget request and the likely congressional funding that you will be receiving will be sufficient to continue to place CBOCs where they are needed, not just this year or next year, but in years to come.
Ms. Sánchez, thank you for that question. Obviously, over the next 10 years, we believe that our SCIP investment plan appropriately emphasizes the use of what we call as primary care. And that primary care embodied in the community-based operating clinic is really, the whole purpose of that is to move the point of care closer to our veterans, to make the access easier for them. Our goal is to have 70% of our veterans within a 30-minute drive to that facility. So we see a need for increased number of CBOCs and increased square footage on our secondary and tertiary facilities to be able to meet that combined need.
Okay, I'm pleased to hear that, but I'm sort of a little concerned because the SCIP seems to rely so much on increased funding in the out years, and I'm wondering if you can explain your reason for believing that substantially more funding is going to become available down the line. I mean, we're living in very challenging economic times and challenging certainly for budgets at the federal level. So I'm sort of curious as to why you believe that there will be more funding later on down the line.
Well, yes, ma'am. I mean, this is obviously a huge need that we have. It's going to cost a lot of money, and to the best of our ability to calculate and forecast, this is the size of the demand that we have for our veterans. We have to step up to providing these facilities. Our number one priority is to obviously make sure that those who do go into battle have the equipment and the training they need, and that this VA is there for them when they return home. And so this quantification through SCIP is all about saying this is a very big number. We're going to have to go out and fund this over a 10-year period. Our assessment of this year's funds availability relative to the other services that we have to continue to provide without interruption was such that we arrived on the number of $2.8 billion for our veterans in 12 in this capital investment. It will need to be more in out years, clearly, as we go forward, and my hope is that Congress will be able to find those funds.
So the hope is that down the line, Congress will fund it at a higher level than now.
I'm not asking for additional funds.
No, I realize you're not asking for additional funding now, but you're sort of relying on the fact that Congress will be generous down the line and fund at a higher level.
Well, no, ma'am. The President also will take a look at his budget for fiscal year 13 and again go through the same process. So there will be a number of opportunities to step forward with a specific request in 13 and beyond that we believe will and can achieve this total investment over a 10-year period. It's just that the numbers in 12, which obviously the only numbers that have come forward on the budget right now, are at $2.8 billion.
Okay, I'm not convinced that that's the best way to budget, but you and I will just have to agree to disagree on that. In your written testimony, you noted the importance of enhanced use leases, EULs, in getting homeless veterans off the streets and into homes. But I'm hearing concerns from veterans back home that not enough of the benefits of EULs necessarily go to veterans, and that veterans would like a more transparent EUL process in which they can give input and advice. Have you heard, I'm wondering if you've heard of similar complaints, and whether you have or you haven't, can you explain what is being done to maybe address that concern?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, the EUL, as I described earlier, is an incredibly useful tool for VA. Since about 2006, we have saved $250 million of taxpayer money by the use of EULs. What it does is leverage private sector and NGO investment in facilities that we would otherwise have to build with direct capital infusion. We can spread those costs out over time, so it's extremely useful. I'd like to ask Mr. Sullivan to talk a little bit about the EUL process that we use, how it includes stakeholder input, and how we make sure that there is transparency in the process.
Okay.
Sure. Let me try and respond to that question about transparency in the EUL process. All EU projects and EU efforts require a public hearing. We do it locally at the site and give notice to all of the interested stakeholders in terms of the VSOs, in terms of the local community, the local municipalities or counties or other elected officials. We also notify Congress prior to that hearing to make sure we get the input of everybody if there are particular issues that are there. Some EU projects, there are relatively no issue. Other projects, there are issues. Most of them end up being to deal with folks, not necessarily veteran groups or veterans, but local jurisdictions that may have issues in terms of a homeless veteran project going in, and what does that mean for the community, not necessarily what it means for veterans, but other issues. If there's a particular issue on the one you talk about, we'd be happy to meet with you and find out what that is. It is a very give and take process of developing an EU, and we should address that, and we will look at that situation.
I appreciate the offer, and I would appreciate an opportunity to discuss those specific concerns with you. I'm wondering if I can beg the indulgence of the chairman for an additional 30 seconds to ask one last question of the secretary. Is there anything being done to address the specific needs of homeless female veterans that you're aware of?
Ma'am, let me ask Pat Vandenberg to speak to that issue. As you know, we have a tremendous focus on making sure that we are building in our capital infrastructure facilities suitable for women. That has gone directly into one of the Secretary's major initiatives in this area. And of course, all of our preventive activities in VHA are focused on avoiding homelessness to begin with for both men and women. And then obviously the specific intervention in the HUD-VASH voucher process and elsewhere is without regard to gender.
Thank you for that question. Dr. Patty Hayes is our VHA lead on looking at all issues pertaining to women's veterans, and she has been particularly effective in her outreach efforts to better understand what the unique circumstance of homeless women veterans is, what gives rise to it, and she's collaborated extensively with Lisa Pape in the lead, looking at how we develop the actual initiatives and outreach to get our veterans, including our women veterans, into appropriate housing.
Great, I appreciate that, and I thank the chairman.